Okay, so recording is started. Welcome everybody. As I said before I turned on the recording, this is the last of 12 classes, a 12-part series. We've reached the end of the line with Chodesh Adar, which is associated with the zodiac sign of Pisces and the tribe of Naphtali in the Kabbalistic lineup of the 12 tribes. As I've discussed before, there's more than one way to look at the 12 tribes in their order, but you'll see through the presentation that the order of the 12 tribes Kabbalistically corresponds to the encampment order of the tribes, not the chronological or birth order, which is the way it's presented on the Hoshin Mishpat, which is the high priest's breastplate. So welcome people who are coming in now. Welcome Miss Amy Wachtel, Atlas Don't Shrug, Holding Up the World. Oh, Mark says he read Dinolo. You read Shabtai Dinolo? Did you read the Sharf book, the blue book? The book?
Yeah, I love it.
Isn't that a crazy book? I love that book. That book changed my life.
Yeah.
There's such a long list of books that changed my life, but that was definitely one of them. Hi, Amy Joy. So happy to see you. So I'm going to let Shoshana continue to let people in. So just watch the door, and I'm sharing the screen now. But what I'd really like to do is slideshow. Let's see if it'll let me do a slideshow from the beginning. Okay. Sort of, kind of. All right, Tov. All right. Here we are at the end of the line with Mazal Dagim. This is Chodesh Adar and the sign of Pisces. Of course, everybody knows that sometimes there's two Adars, and we're going to talk about that as well during this presentation. Shoshana, are you able to see the waiting room okay? With the screen taking up this much
Yes,
room?
it's not a problem.
Okay, great. So here we are, and one more time for those who have not participated in this class so far, I will just give you a background. Why are we even talking about this? We're talking about this for this reason, because on one hand, the Orthodox Jewish point of view about astrology is historically rather negative. And by historically, I'm only talking about the last few decades of life since after World War II, because before World War II, from antiquity up until the eve of World War II, astrological motifs in art and artifacts, household items, ritual objects, Torah scrolls, circumcision wimples for baby boys, the walls of synagogues, the ceilings of synagogues, books, mahzors, etc., were commonly illustrated with astrological motifs. Not occasionally, but commonly, and throughout all of the Jewish diaspora and in the land of Israel throughout history. And you have that truth and reality on one hand, which is objectively factual and verifiable. If you'd like to go to the index for Jewish art that the Hebrew University of Jerusalem maintains, you can see thousands of examples of this that they have managed to collect. So it's not like a myth, like, oh, we're talking about something that can't be proven. We have material objects that shows us this. And on the other hand, we have a textual prohibition against inquiring of astrologers and consulting lots. It's very significant that the consulting lots is put in the same sentence with the prohibition against consulting astrologers, because lots, of course, are as in Purim, right? And there is an idea of this having to do somehow with the occult or magic in some way, which it couldn't actually be further from the truth. So my personal experience when I moved to Israel in 2007 and told everybody there I was an astrologer, and on one hand, I got a lot of this, Asur, it's forbidden. And on the other hand, I got a lot of the same people coming to me on the down low saying, please do my chart, because they know that it has something to do with us, but there's a lot of social pressure to deny that. So my investigation into why is this such a paradox was to find out how can we reconcile the gap that exists between the lived realities of Jewish people and the Jewish legal text. So that was what set me off on my journey to figure out what the heck was going on with Jewish astrology. So as I said before, there are so many wonderful and beautiful examples of astrology and art and architecture and ephemera. This is, of course, one of the most glorious ones. It's the painted wooden synagogues, one of, I think, 7 of them that are in Poland that are just adorned with these insane ceiling art motifs of all 12 tribes of the zodiac, 12 tribes, the 12 tribes of Israel and their corresponding zodiac signs. And originally this was in the 16th and 17th century that they were built. They were destroyed and rebuilt. This is a replica, the picture of the replica. Of course, there was no photography in the 16th century. So it's ridiculous to say that traditional Orthodox observant communities had nothing to do with astrology in the past, because obviously they did. So where do I get my information from? Well, first of all, I go right to the Chumash, to the Tanakh, to the book of Numbers, Bamidbar. The first Parsha in Bamidbar talks about the encampments of the 12 tribes, and very specifically, it gives the order of the encampment order of the 12 tribes, which is always the same. As everybody knows, the 12 tribes left Egypt on their way to Israel, the promised land, the land of Canaan. It took them 40 years to get there. And during that time period, they encamped, they made camp in the desert. They put the tabernacle in the middle of the camp, and around the camp, encamped around them, exactly always in the same configuration, always Yehuda to the east and Ephraim to the west, Dan to the north and Reuven to the south, and the other tribes arrayed around them in their sections, and there was never any variation. It wasn't just like one day Yehuda said, you know what, I'm sick of being on the east, I want to try the southwest. It wasn't like that. Why? Because this idea of as above, so below, because the encampment itself was a direct reflection of what was known and well known at that time in terms of astrology. This over here that I'm moving my mouse around is the ecliptic, the idea that there is a 360-degree circle around the Earth, basically at the waist, like if the Earth was wearing a belt or a waistband, and it's divided into 360 degrees and 12 signs of 30 degrees each. That is called the zodiac. The zodiac is a direct reflection of the 12 tribes. And as I've said before, there's 88 galaxies. There are 88 constellations in our galaxy, but we only use these 12. Why these 12? Well, they have a spiritual and historic correspondence to the 12 tribes of Israel. That's why. So in our tradition, I was talking a lot before about material objects, but within text itself, there is many, many examples of the commonness of the belief in astrology and astrological understandings of the characteristics of the different zodiac signs. This can be seen, of course, in the Sefer Yetzirah, which is our foundational mystical text, in the Talmud, and the many discussions about the different zodiac signs and what their influences are. And I like this poem very much by Ibn Gabriel, who was early medieval Spanish poet, in which he wrote Keter Malchut, which is still sung by the Sephardim on Yom Kippur, with many, many verses about the stars. I'm not going to read this whole thing, but you see that Saturn, like it starts off with Saturn. Why? Well, because Saturn is the planet of the Jewish people. Okay. So this is where we've been, this is where we're going, this is where we are. This is the cycle of sacred time that is the Jewish year. It's a model of the 12 tribes around the Mishkan, the tabernacle, and it's also a model of like the human psyche and the evolution of the human soul. It's very scalable, you know, on the very most Peshat and simplistic level. It's the 12 tribes and the 12 signs. And as you ideate outward, you understand that each one of these signs has spiritual and emotional meanings. And when you study astrology, you understand how that corresponds with, when you study psychological astrology, which is modern astrology, understanding that nowadays we don't so much think of things as being reflective, as causative. We think of them as being reflective. The planets and the influences are reflecting realities rather than causing them. So we started off last year when we first started this yeshiva. I did the first class on Aries, and then every month we went all the way around. Here we are on Naphtali in Pisces, which is ruled by Jupiter in classical astrology, Neptune in modern astrology. This is the mutable water sign. Mutable signs are changeable signs. There's four of each of the modalities. The modalities are cardinal, fixed, and mutable. Modality is just like what it sounds. It has to do with action, or how a zodiac sign, what kind of action it takes. So the cardinal signs are the signs that initiate. Cardinal starts things. Cardinal initiate things. Fixed signs, of which there are 4 of them, establishes things. They affix them. They establish them into manifestation. And the mutable signs are the signs that transform and change things. So the mutable signs are Pisces and Virgo, and Sagittarius and Gemini. So we've gone, it always goes like this: cardinal, fixed, mutable, cardinal, fixed, mutable, 12 signs, 3 modalities, 4 signs in each of them. So we've gotten to the last of the mutable signs, which is Pisces. So Mazal Dagim is the month of Pisces. Dagim, of course, means fish, not dogs. Dog is Kelev, but dog, D-A-G, if you were going to translate it, is fish, Daled Gimel, right? So here is the famous mosaic floors of these synagogues in Israel. This is from the Hamat Tiberias synagogue, which is from the 3rd century. This is from the Beit Alpha synagogue, 6th century. By this time, you can see how the Byzantine influence really kicked in by the 6th century, because Byzantine art, if you know anything about Byzantine art, it's very flat. It's super like flattened and 2-dimensional. It has a very flat aesthetic to it, and you can really see the difference between these fish and these fish. But they're both Pisces fish because they're 2 fish swimming in opposite directions, seemingly unaware of each other. And this goes to the characteristic of Pisces, because Pisces rules the 12th house of the zodiac in anybody's natal chart, in the whole natal chart lineup of the 1st through 12th houses. And the 12th house has to do with a person's subconscious or unconscious mind. So there's a lot about the subconscious and unconscious that has to do with Pisces. Pisces is very psychic. Pisces is very, very intuitive. Probably the most strongly intuitive sign. But intuition is not rational thought. Intuition is not intellect. It's a completely different skill set, and it's one that Pisces embodies, and it's sort of symbolized in this kind of like unconscious, not seeing each other, but going in these different directions. And that also goes to the mutable nature of the sign of Pisces and the doubleness of it. Not a great picture, but anyway, this is a wimple, which is a circumcision cloth that was used to bind up little baby boys on the 8th day after they had their Brit Milah and were welcomed into the congregation of Israel. Their mothers embroidered these beautiful cloths for them that often had, especially in medieval Ashkenaz, the signs of the zodiac that they were born under. So this little boy, and even as recently, because medieval Ashkenaz was centuries before this was from Germany in 1825. So this is actually a practice that was retained for hundreds and hundreds of years. This is the wimple of Yaakov, the son of Yitzhak, from Derenberg, Germany, and it has Naphtali, the hind, over here. Naphtali is the tribe that is associated with Chodesh Adar. This is from a Torah binder from Germany in 1728, and here from the Amsterdam Machzor, Germany 1240. These both have 3 fishes, which is a motif that you see occasionally as well. It's kind of interesting that you don't see the 3 fishes in antiquity. By the Middle Ages, you do start to see more representations of 3 fishes. And I have no good explanation whatsoever as to why they started to use 3 fishes, but I am sort of trying to investigate that because I feel like it has something to do with the association of the fish with Christianity. And we'll be talking about that a little bit later. So this is Pisces from a Megillah Esther, an Esther scroll from the early 18th century in Germany. Of course, we're going to be talking about Purim because Purim is the big holiday of Chodesh Adar. Here it says that in the Midrash, Esther Rabbah, Haman then turned to examining the signs of the zodiac to determine when to destroy the Jews. On reaching the sign of Pisces, fishes, which shines in the month of Adar, he found no merit in it and rejoiced. He said, "Just as fishes swallow one another, so will I swallow them." So this is in our Midrash. This is like 1st century, I think. Jonathan, are you there? Is the Midrash Esther Rabbah 1st or 5th century? I can never remember. But anyway, it's very, very early. And it was evident there that, astrological thought was involved. So here is a beautiful, beautiful Megillah Esther that was decorated with all 12 of the zodiac signs from the Ottoman Empire about 1800. This scroll, when you open it, it has a very elaborate depiction of all of the signs of the zodiac, which apparently is a recurrent motif in decorated Megillah, not just that they would have the signs that have to do with Adar, but all the zodiac signs would be in these decorated Megillah. Of course, we just talked about the Midrash about Haman plotting to destroy the Jewish nation. So God was mad, of course, like he was like, no, you're not going to get your way. He thwarted Haman's plans and said, fish sometimes swallow their prey, but they too can be swallowed. So that's the rest of that Midrash. So this is a little description of this picture that we were just looking at. I don't know if you can see it in this. Oh yeah, the silver case. Okay, so over here, back to this picture of the silver case that holds this Megillah is also decorated with a fish scale pattern. So that is also a nod to the idea of fish. So Adar, we looked at the 12 signs of the zodiac and the 12 months of the year and the 12 possible ways to write the divine name of the Yud and the He and the Vav and the He, which starts off in its normal order on Chodesh Nisan and the sign of Aries and goes around all the way around the zodiac till we get to the end. Pisces, He, Vav, Yud is the final permutation of those 4 letter combinations. So everybody knows in Kabbalah that there's the idea that the letters themselves have individual and unique powers. So the combining of letters was a common Kabbalistic practice. It was a meditative practice, and it was also a magical practice. So the combining of the letters for the different months was designed really to, I'm going to say, trigger or release the particular power of that particular month. This is our friend, our old friend that we'll be saying goodbye to after this class, the Zodiac Man. This is the idea of medical melothesia, which is not a Jewish idea at all. It's just that the Jews, like all the other civilizations, adapted it. And that's the idea that all body parts are associated in some way with planets and constellations, and that healing was accomplished by drawing down the spiritual power by use of amulets. Amulets that were decorated with zodiac signs and symbols that had to do with the zodiac signs. Sometimes amulets had pictures, sometimes they had Hebrew letters, sometimes they were also rocks or crystals or feathers or whatever. They were three-dimensional objects, and they were placed on the body part that was ailing at specific times that had to do with the zodiac signs. Like if a person had feet problems, they were going to think about Pisces. They were going to make an amulet with the symbols that have to do with Pisces and put it on the feet of the person who had feet problems during the time that was calculated to have the greatest impact, or being able to receive the greatest blessing, so to speak, the spiritual power of the sign of Pisces, which would probably be when Pisces was rising on the easternmost horizon of the zodiac. Also would have to do the calculations of this kind of medicine, also had to do with the zodiac sign that the actual person who was suffering from the malady was born under. And there was a lot of calculating, astrological calculating that went on in healing, which is why astrology was associated with the healing arts, and also why the Rambam, who famously was not a big fan of astrology and thought that it caused all sorts of problems, was not able to completely forbid it, and in fact permitted the use of astrology in the creation and use of sigulot and amulets for healing purposes. Because, as I would like to say to the Rambam, and I plan to say when I see him in the world to come, is you can't fight City Hall. Okay, so here's a kind of interesting little fun fact. In traditional astrology, Jupiter, the planet Jupiter, which is called Sedek, it's the planetary ruler of both Sagittarius and Pisces. So I want you to think for a minute about Zodiac Man. Sagittarius rules the hips and the thighs, and Pisces rules the feet. So the beginning and the end are both ruled classically by Jupiter. The beginning thighs and the end feet of the legs. So this influence of Jupiter, Sedek is Jupiter in Hebrew, which means, of course, righteousness, on the beginning and the end of the leg indicates that the righteous person, who is the tzaddik, again, Jupiter, is the foundation of the world. It was this attribute that the guardian spirit of Esav wanted to injure in Yaakov and his offspring during their wrestling match. I really love this picture. It's Jacob wrestling with the angel by an artist named Edward Nippers, someone I've never heard of before, but I do love his art. And when I searched for images about this, I found this many years ago, and I use it a lot. The Zohar associates the wounding of Yaakov's thigh by the guardian spirit of Esav with the desire on the part of evil to end financial support of Torah study. Now, I got to tell you, I'm very sensitive to this kind of language. Immediately when I hear any kind of Torah talking about how important it is to financially support Torah study, I automatically get defensive. But I was able to put aside that little problem that I have in my brain to really look into this. So there is the idea, of course, that a person who is devoted to Torah and is a Talmud Chacham needs to have some kind of financial support so that they are able to do that. So according to the sages, both the right and the left thighs were wounded. Well, this is obviously a midrash, by Esav's guardian spirit during the wrestling match that took place on the river Yabok.
That's an amazing teaching. That's amazing.
It is. The right thigh came to symbolize Purim and the left Hanukkah. So it's here that the source of the custom to increase the giving of charity, tzedakah, tzedek, Jupiter, increase, Jupiter, expand, enlarge. I'm giving you all these keywords during these two holidays. And of course, Al HaNisim is only said during Purim and Hanukkah, the 2 months traditionally associated with Jupiter, Tzedek, the planet associated with Abraham, our great patriarch who embodied the Tzedek and the attributes of Chesed and Tzedakah. So I want you guys to just hold that in your mind whenever you think about Hanukkah and Purim, that they are related because of the planet Jupiter and because of this association with Tzedek, Jupiter, and righteousness. It's very important to connect those two. So here I'm going to talk a little bit about the tribe of Naphtali. He was the second son of Bilhah, the sixth child of Yaakov. The idea of Naphtali is to win through wrestling, because there's the idea that there was wrestling between Rachel and Leah. Of course, it was their big contest to see who could have more children than the other, or how were they going to give Jacob the 12 sons that he was supposed to have. This is a very, very common theme in Torah and Midrash and all of our other writings. So, of course, all of the 12 tribes received blessings from Jacob, and also at the end of Deuteronomy, Moshe also gave over blessings. So Yaakov said about Naphtali is a hind let loose. He gives beautiful words. And Moshe, when he was blessing the tribe of Naphtali, said, oh, Naphtali, satisfied with favor and full with the blessings of the Lord, possess thou the sea and the south, meaning the Sea of Galilee, the Lake Kinneret, okay, and the area south of that. This is a picture of the flag of the tribe of Naphtali from a wall painting from the early 20th century, and you can see it says Degel Machane Naphtali here. So what was on Naphtali's flag, it wasn't the fish of Pisces, it was the deer of Naphtali. A hind is a deer. Okay. I think this is kind of a funny picture. It's actually, instead of two fish, there are two giraffes here. There's often two in art that describes Pisces and Naphtali and Adar. There's often double because it's a double sign. All the mutable signs have dual natures. So here we have the two giraffes. This is from a Romanian synagogue in 1927. So Yaakov talked about how swift Naphtali was in his blessing. There's various takes on this. So on one hand, it's a reference to the swiftness of his agricultural territory, the Valley of Gennesaret. Okay, that's where the fruit ripens very quickly. It's very warm there, by the way, because I lived in Sfat and I'm very familiar with how warm it gets down there by the Sea of Galilee. That because of how quickly, because of the weather there, this unusual phenomenon of quick ripening fruit brought people to praise God. And wait, I want to show you. Oh, I think I put it out of order. Okay. Sorry about that. I hate when I do that. Okay, so here we have Naphtali again as the deer, and here he's like a stag because he's got massive horns. That's from a Torah crown from Turkey, 1928. And here in the great and glorious Adar synagogue of Aleppo, Syria, now located in Nachlaot, Jerusalem, right down the street from my old house. You can see it to this very day. Naphtali there with all of his other brothers and the zodiac signs. So here's a picture of Rachel giving Bilhah to Jacob from the Story of Jacob series, which is a gigantic tapestry that I would love to go to the Metropolitan Museum of Art to see with my best friend, Amy Wachtel, when, again, we are able to travel. So just put that on my list of things to do. This tells the story of when Bilhah became pregnant again. Of course, her first child was Dan, which is the tribal ruler of Capricorn and Chodesh Tevet. And then Bilhah had another child, and she gave the child to Rachel, and Rachel said, by Hashem's bonds, I have been joined with my sister Leah, and I've also prevailed. And she called his name Naphtali. And there are many interpretations of what that means. One is from the root of Palel, that has to do with the Hebrew word tefillah. And this is because Rachel said that Hashem accepted my prayers when I prayed to have a child like my sister. That's from Onkelos. Rachel also prophesied about the future with this name of Naphtali because the warriors Barak and Devorah, they were both from the tribe of Naphtali, and they would be helped by Hashem through their prayer. And the Midrash also says that the name Naphtali is related to the pasuk from Shir HaShirim, the sweetness drops from your lips, and that is a reference to the future redemption of the Jewish people. Okay, and so Rachel called him Naphtali, which means I have prevailed, because she prevailed over her sister in a divine contest, the mighty wrestlings that the two of them had. So a lot that we know about Naphtali has to do with how fast he was. He was truly as swift as a deer. One of the most famous stories about Naphtali was when the brothers returned from Egypt to tell Joseph that, to tell their father Jacob that Joseph was still alive. Naphtali was the first one to reach Yaakov to bring the good news. Of course, we also know he didn't personally give him the good news. He gave the good news to Serach, the Bat Asher, the daughter of Asher, who sat by her grandfather and played a harp or some kind of a string instrument and started a song, slowly telling him this news, like, there was a man who had 12 sons, and one of the sons was lost, but a miracle happened and he was found. So it wasn't just Naphtali bursting in and saying, oh my God, Joseph is alive, because nobody wanted to give their father a heart attack. But anyway, Naphtali was the one who brought the good news to the family, and Serach Bat Asher was the one who delivered the good news. And then fast forward after the death of Yaakov in Egypt, in Mitzrayim, when his sons brought his body to be buried in the cave of Machpelah, Esav, good old Esav, did not want to allow it, because he said, no, I'm sorry, there's only one parking space left, okay? The last free burial spot was him, and Naphtali was like, no, and he ran. I mean, the Midrash is cute and sweet and funny in this way, but it says that he ran, dashed off to Egypt and brought back the bill of sale, like the property ownership document, which clearly stated that Esav had sold this burial spot to Yaakov. So he was quick on the draw there. And it also is said that whenever it says in the Torah, Yaakov sent, without specifying who he sent, he always chose Naphtali as his emissary because he was the fastest. And this is also interesting. In ancient times, kings used to send messages to one another through the deer. The deer who were born in the north would be raised in the palace of the king in the south, because when you look at the land of Israel, the kingdom headquarters was in the land of Judea, Jerusalem, right, which is in the south compared to the territories in the north. So the king would tie his messages between the horns of the deer, and the deer would then run to return to where it was born. This is from the Rambam, okay? I have no proof of this whatsoever, but we're not going to diss the Rambam here. I like this story. So we learn from the second part of the verse, says the Rambam, who brings goodly words having to do with Naphtali, that the deer was especially selected to bring good tidings. So good news comes through the deer. But here is something interesting. The swift and the straggler. So he was very swift, but he was also the final and last one of the tribes who would be marching under the flag of Dan, which was Dan, Asher, and Naphtali, bringing up the rear. So you saw the big circle before, the 12 tribes in their configuration, but that's in their encampment. When they moved from one camp to another, they didn't march in a circle, they marched in a straight line. And the beginning of the line was the tribe of Yehuda, who was at the front of the line. And then right behind Yehuda was Moshe and Aaron carrying the implements of the tabernacle that they were in charge of. Then after them was the tribe of Reuven and all of the tribes that were associated with him under his flag, and the Levitical family that was associated with his tribe, et cetera, to get to the end of the line. Last camp, the last tribe in the very rear was Naphtali. He's the fastest, but he's at the end. And it's interesting that the stragglers, which you hear about, the people who couldn't keep up, those were the ones that Amalek attacked when the children of Israel on the march. And it's part of the tikkun of Adar and Pisces and the tribe of Naphtali, the mitzvah to remember what Amalek did to us. What did he do? He attacked the stragglers when we were marching through the desert and killed them. We always have Shabbat Zachor during Chodesh Adar, and that's when we read about Amalek. We always read about it during Chodesh Adar, and we just did that last week or the week before during Adar. So it's sort of an interesting conundrum where the fastest was put into the position of the slowest, right? It's a way like, why wouldn't you put the fastest at the front? Well, because I guess you have to go slow enough so that the stragglers are taken care of. But it's interesting that Amalek is related to this story, especially because of Amalek's relationship to Purim, because of course, Haman was a direct descendant of Amalek. So in terms of the historic incidents, Hiram, who was the famous worker in brass that Solomon it says in the King James Version, he was ever a lover of King David, meaning they were besties, best friends. And after King David died, he made sure that King David's son Solomon had enough supplies to build the first temple. And so he was a man who was the son of a woman of Naphtali and a man of the kingdom of Tyre. I hope that I'm saying that right, Tyre. I'm pretty sure it's Tyre. Also, Barak was from the tribe of Naphtali, and the majority consensus says that Devorah was as well, and that the prophet Isaiah anticipates that the area of Naphtali will see the dawn of the messianic deliverance, which makes sense because you understand that the Messiah, when the Messiah comes, he starts off in the Galilee, or they start off on the Galilee and work their way south. So here's a funny thing about Pisces. Pisces is famous for, well, okay, think about drinking during Purim, okay? Pisces is famous for being susceptible to altered states of consciousness. I talked before about Pisces having to do with the unconscious and subconscious mind. Also has to do with altered states. Pisces are kind of famous for being, I'm going to say, if you surveyed every single AA meeting in the entire world, I would bet you that there would be a lot of heavy Pisces influence. There's an area in Israel near the Sea of Galilee. This is a picture of it that was taken in the early 20th century. It's called the Fountain of the Fig Trees. So I can't find where I originally found the source for this, and it's driving me crazy. I can't remember if it was the Midrash or the Talmud, but there's a story about the figs of Gennesaret in this area of Naphtali. They ripened so quickly and they were so sweet that people gorged themselves on them and they got stoned on them. Okay, they were completely under the influence of these crazy figs from Gennesaret, so much so that they were forbidden to act as witnesses in a Beit Din trial if they had been found to be eating the figs of Gennesaret prior to the trial, or if they had been eating them while witnessing the transgression, as their perceptions were altered and couldn't be trusted to be factual. So I do like the idea of Pisces and Chodesh Adar having to do with altered states, because we do have a tradition on Purim of drinking ad lo yodea, like so that we can't tell the difference between Mordechai and Haman. Okay, so there's that idea of altered states of consciousness having to do with Chodesh Adar and the sign of Pisces. And whenever I think about that, I always think about the crazy figs of Gennesaret, and I would like some of those figs about now. So this is just a little thing from Josephus. This is a quotation from his description of the various regions of the land of Israel, and he talks about how amazingly fertile, and he does mention the fig, this whole area of Naphtali is. And so here's kind of an aerial view of the area of Naphtali that's in Eretz Yisrael. And you can see the ocean there is not the Mediterranean, that is the Sea of Galilee. So you see where that is located. So much of, this is the Christian part, much of the ministry of Jesus took place in the region of Naphtali. The fish is the early Christian symbol, and this was when Christianity was a subsect of Judaism for the first, I don't know, I'm gonna say, let's just have fun and say 100 years of its existence. And it was the sign of the fish, which of course is a common symbol that was carved into rocks and walls, was a sign of Jewish believers in the messianic status of Jesus that was used. It's a story in the New Testament, if you've never read it. It's in 3 out of the 4 Gospels, and it's told entirely different ways about Jesus healing the madmen of Gennesaret and restoring him to his right mind. And here you see this picture of the pigs running away because he was a crazy guy. He was crazy, and the demons that Jesus cast out of him entered the pigs, and the pigs jumped off of the cliff into the sea and drowned. Okay, I'm going to say that maybe the man actually went crazy from overeating the figs. Maybe he ate so many of the figs of Gennesaret, the ones that ripened so quickly, that he literally lost his mind. And here you see fig trees in the background of this 6th century picture of Jesus casting out the demons. So it's a little clue, like little clues are scattered all over in art and art history. And also later in the story, depending on which version you read, Jesus curses the fig tree for not bearing fruit at the proper time. So this curse in one version of the stories happens in this region. Another version of the story, it happens when he's on his way from this region to Jerusalem. Nobody really knows, but it would make sense for him to come across a fig tree that was not bearing fruit and curse it for not bearing fruit, which is also a very strange story.
Lorelai,
yes.
I just have a thought and a question. The fish,
Yeah.
the fish is kind of both a symbol of escaping the flood. It's used on amulets, and it's
Right.
also a code word for Christians because it contains Jesus Christ Savior in the language of the Greek.
It's
a code word, plus it's also kind of an amuletic thing.
Right.
Both. that I
This is
understand.
true.
Fish.
You're right about that. I don't have the Greek letters that you see often in that symbol. You see that, I used to see that all the time on people's license, on the bumpers, the fish symbol with the Greek letters inside of them. That
Ichthyos.
yeah,
Jesus
ichthyos.
Christ, Savior, right?
Right,
Savior, Lord. It's
right.
all in the ichthus in Greek. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's interesting. It's interesting that the fish association is so strong in the area that Jesus did most of his work, and most of his ministry that happened in the north, not and around the Sea of Galilee. If you go right now to Tiberias and drive all around the Sea of Galilee, there's a million little signs. Here you are in Capernaum. Here you are in Gennesaret. Here Jesus did that and this. It's the number one Christian tourism spot, much more so than Jerusalem. He only went to Jerusalem to get into trouble, but he did his actual work, more of his actual work in the northern part of Israel, and particularly in the area around the Sea of Galilee, which is of course where he went fishing for men, and he saw Peter and his brother fishing and said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Oh, we're fishing." He goes, "Follow me and I'll make you fishers of men." So there's so much fish symbolism in the story and the stories that are associated with Jesus from the first century. So yeah, it's you could do a whole class on that. So back to the planetary associations, I'm going to say that there's 2 planets, of course, that are associated with the sign of Pisces. And in classical astrology, it's Jupiter, and in modern astrology, it's Neptune. So we talked about this when we talked about Sagittarius, about Jupiter, and how Abraham, our forefather, is the patriarch that's associated with Jupiter, because he was thought to be basically the father of astrology, or the father of the Jewish tradition of astrology. And this is the glyph for the symbol for the planet of Jupiter. And it's, of course, has a lot to do with good luck, luck, growth, expansion, optimism, abundance, and understanding, and wisdom. These are things that are attributes of Jupiter and that are applicable both to Sagittarius and to Pisces. In the Talmud, in their whole discussion of which is more important or influential, the planetary ruler of the day of the week a person is born on, or the planetary ruler of the hour that they were born in. It's a big machloket. Actually, the rabbis come down on voting for the rising sign being more important than the day of the week. And then they give some explanations about personality traits and qualities due to the planetary influence of the planets. Sunday, Jupiter, Tzedek, is the king of the planets, both in the size and the namesake, because of course Jupiter is the Roman name for Zeus, king of the Greek pantheon. Jupiter, the largest of all the planets, is the planet of extremes, either completely good or bad, either or dichotomies, pure or impure, holy or profane. And that really, you can see that a lot in both Sagittarius and Pisces as being kind of natural born extremists in different ways. In this whole section from Shabbat 156a in the Talmud, it says that this whole story about Jupiter having to literally be moved by God in order to correct Abraham's infertility. Not that it wasn't that Abraham said, what are you talking about? I can't have my own child. You know that I'm infertile. God could have said to him, "Oh, you're right. I'm going to wave my magic wand, or you should go down and throw yourself into the Jordan River, or take mud of the Jordan River and apply it to your genitals." He didn't say any of those things. He's like, "Okay, let me move the planet literally from the west into the east." So this is the level of understanding that the rabbis of the Talmudic era had about astrology. definitely understood the planets as having influence to the point where God actually had to move the planet to make Abraham fertile. In this same section, it talks about the different days of the week that and the signs, the planetary influences. So he who was born under Tzedek, Jupiter, will be a right-doing man, Zadkan. And Rabbi Nachman ben Isaac said, right-doing in good deeds. So there's the beneficent aspect of Jupiter that's commonly known, because Jupiter and Venus are called the beneficent planets. They tend to bring more positive attributes to them, although even the positive attributes sometimes have negative connotations, rather than the malefic planets. And of course, this is all from classical astrology, because modern astrology doesn't really look at things as either beneficent or malefic, because we're looking at it more like challenging and challenges to be overcome, or natural things that come naturally easy. Neptune is the modern planetary ruler of Pisces, of course. Why? Because Neptune, god of the ocean. Neptune was discovered in 1846. It was the second planet to be discovered after Uranus, because from the dawn of time until the discovery of Uranus, everybody thought there were only these particular planets, ending at Saturn. Saturn was the end of the line, okay? But then they discovered Uranus, then they discovered Neptune, and finally in the 1930s, Pluto. So Neptune is a mysterious and slippery fish of a planet. It had been observed many times before, but not recognized as a planet. You saw it, but it wasn't necessarily thought of as being a planet. Galileo saw Neptune and mistook it for a fixed star because of how close it was to the planet Jupiter when he saw it in December of 1612. So there you saw Neptune and Jupiter so close together that that Galileo himself couldn't figure out that he was a planet. And that's very Neptunian. Neptune has a lot to do with illusion and artifice. And that has a lot to do with Purim and the wearing of masks and putting on costumes. So we'll talk a little bit more about like the division of planets at the end but anyway, so they had to split the planets from the outside in. So they started with Saturn, then Jupiter. They split Jupiter to give rulership of Neptune to Pisces. Then they had to split Mars, which was the next planet up, to give rulership of Pluto to Scorpio. And that's where we're holding right now. If they discover any more planets, they're going to have to split Venus. That's going to be a problem. Okay, so here's some things about Neptune and Pisces. Neptune, the planet itself, has to do with dissolution and idealization. When I say dissolution, it's the opposite of structure. Saturn is about structure. Neptune is anti-structure. Neptune is the desire to meld in undifferentiated oneness with the divine. This is what Pisces is all about. Pisces is the prophet, the good Samaritan, also the addict, because of Pisces being very, very susceptible to all substances, especially alcohol, but drugs as well. The unstable person, the flake, the mystic. Pisces longs to leave the prison of the body. Pisces is not into embodiment. Pisces is about transcending the body, wants to meld with the universal oneness and to be one with the spirit. As I said before, vulnerable to substance abuse. They make great peacemakers, spiritual advisors, artists. They're sensitive, psychic. They long for spiritual transcendence. Their kind of love is sacrificial love, which can turn into martyrdom. They feel that they're divinely guided in many ways. They're altruistic. They can be a very corrupted version of Pisces can be the eternal victim, the kind of person who's like eternally always victimized by everything. Also, they're very intuitive and empathic. They're a little slippery like a fish that can be vague, hard to pin down, easily seduced, vulnerable to cults, gurus, and strong egos, artists, poets, painters, filmmakers, photographers, mediums, naturopaths, homeopaths, healers, and psychics. So the function of the planet Neptune, the ruling planet of Pisces, has to do with the underwater realm of dreams and fantasies and inspired perceptions, harmonious connections, lack of boundaries. And you see that in natal charts, wherever Neptune is by sign and by house is where you're going to have boundary issues. Because again, Neptune is anti-boundary, whereas Saturn is all about the boundaries. Neptune just wants to jump straight into the arms of God and just bypass everything in between, okay? They want to meld with the ineffable oneness. Neptune's also associated with magic, spiritual energy, the universality of all life, the unconscious and subconscious, the dream life. Of course, Neptune is associated with daydreaming, whereas Jupiter, the planet that's associated with Chodesh Kislev, Kislev is about night dreaming, dreams that happen at night while you're asleep. Neptune, Adar, is about daydreams, meaning that these are fantasies, okay? Everything that happens under the surface of everything is Neptune. Also, Neptune is in charge of glamour, enchantment, bewitching, and porous boundaries, meaning not having any. This is, I'm not going to read through this whole thing, but this was just a little thing that happened in 2009 when Uranus and Neptune got Hebrew names. It was an article that appeared in Haaretz talking about how the Israeli Academy of Language decided how to name these two planets, Uranus and Neptune. So they gave Neptune Rahab, which makes total sense because Rahab was the sea monster, right? The divine sea monster that is hinted about in the Torah, well, not in the Torah, in the Tanakh, and also in Midrashic literature. Adar, Pisces, Dagim, fish is the letter Kuf. Water, we already talked about that. And the Sefer Yetzirah, it's associated with the left foot. The internal organ is the spleen, which is the organ associated with laughter. According to the Talmud, the spleen laughs, which I had no idea until I read that in Barachot. I'm like, really? That's so funny. So of course, the month of Adar has to do with the attribute of laughter and joy. And the letter Kuf here, God gave rule to Kuf, tied a crown to it, combined one thing with another, and formed with it Pisces in the world, Adar in the ear, and the left foot in the body. And the Zohar explains that the letter Kuf represents the posture of imitation, like a cough, a monkey. So you see the monkey with the letter Kuf here, imitating a man. This posture in the negative sense implies the imitation of the ways of God. In the negative sense, it represents the conformist nature of evil. And it's interesting that the Talmud and the Zohar have very different takes on it. The Talmud talks about the positive aspect, which is the imitation of God's transcendent sanctity. And the Zohar focuses more on the negative aspects, which is the monkey imitating the man. And it makes a joke. The Zohar likes to make jokes. The negative form of this imitation is exemplified by, of course, our old enemy Amalek, whose letters spell out Amal Kaf, the mischief of the monkey, because monkeys are mischief makers, right? The Purim, the evil of Amalek, is personified by Haman, the descendant of Amalek and the persecutor of the Jews. And of course, he fell during Chodesh Adar. This supposedly made a tikkun for the letter Kuf, in bringing it into the realm of holiness. And the posture of imitation, which characterizes Adar, is the root of the Jewish custom to dress up in masquerades during Purim. A little bit more about Kuf and the monkey, false imitation of man. I had not heard this before, that says that somewhere in a midrash that the Torah, after the Tower of Babel fell, as punishment for their disobedience in the building of the tower, God turned the people into apes and demons. I don't know where that's from, and I'd like to find out, because I've heard other things about how demons were.
That's in the Quran and the Hadith.
Okay, good.
It's
Thank
Islamic. It's also in Midrash too, especially in Quranic Hadith sources.
you. Okay, that's really good to know, because there's other sources for the origination of demons that go back to Adam Harishon. So maybe there's different classes of demons.
And there's interaction with Hanuman too in India between Muslims and about the monkey. The symbol of the monkey is courageous, heartfelt, or demonic. There's a debate between Hindus and Muslims over that.
Oh yeah, I would really like to hear more about that.
Yeah,
So
I'll tell you more later. Yeah.
Okay, so monkeys also make people laugh. Laughter is the attribute of Chodesh Adar. So holy laughter, as opposed to the mocking or derisive laughter, is the highest kind of laughter, right? The laughter of Purim. It says laughter is permitted only to a person who is bound with the supernal source, as the Talmud says in Barachot 30b regarding a certain person who was in a state of laughter while putting on his tefillin. The tefillin symbolizes the supernal crown, the root of the soul, the source of laughter. Only when a person is bound to this root may he safely engage in laughter. It was at this level that was reached on Purim, when the Jews had light and gladness and joy and honor. So the laughter that we're laughing on Purim, and the shtiot, the nonsense that we engage in to make ourselves laugh and make other people laugh, the wearing of costumes, all of this has to do with Chodesh Adar, has to do with Pisces, has to do with the whole thing with Amalek and the whole story of Esther and Mordecai. So, wow, it's already 1:03. Okay, so everybody knows, oh, this shouldn't be in here. Sorry, I didn't fix this. It says Ephraim Libra, but never mind. So everybody has all 12 signs of the zodiac in their own chart. So wherever Pisces is in your particular natal chart is where you have that energy. This is a little bit about the opposites. Jupiter and Pisces are opposite Mercury and Virgo in the zodiac. So everything that you see, Pisces over here ruled by Jupiter, Sagittarius, they're opposite each other. So Jupiter and Pisces is concerned with undifferentiated oneness, and Mercury, Virgo, is concerned with discerning one thing or another. That's where you get the dynamic tension between Virgo and Pisces, because they're opposite. Let's say somebody like Jonathan Seidel, who was born on a full moon with the sun in Virgo and the moon in Pisces, embodies that sort of dynamic tension between the analytical, discerning Virgo energy and his moon, his emotional self. I hope you don't mind that I'm just saying something about you personally here, which is in Pisces. A moon in Pisces is so full of undifferentiated oneness and longing to meld with the divine that his heart and his emotional self has no boundaries, but his intellect and his ego self on the Virgo side has to do a lot of hard work to make sure that his tender heart is not harmed and hurt as it easily can be. And that's maybe a little secret round about him. And so I would advise everybody to be very gentle and kind, because even though Jonathan tells a lot of jokes and he can be very funny, he's also very sensitive. And he has a very sweet and sensitive Pisces heart.
Thank you, dear.
So Pisces is sacrifice and Virgo is service. They're both concerned with these things. Pisces strives to be one with the spirit. I perceive, and the idea of unconditional love is Pisces. And here you see them as they're opposed to each other again. Mercury, Gemini, opposite Sagittarius, Jupiter, Pisces, Jupiter, opposite Virgo, Mercury. So in the classical sense, Mercury and Jupiter always go together in the classical sense. You don't see Mercury or Jupiter having anything to do with any of the other signs. The other planets like Venus and Mars, Saturn, do your thing. We don't care, because we're all about the Mercury and Jupiter interaction. And here you see it in this kind of a setup where you see all of the zodiac signs and their planetary and tribal associations. Here's one of the most aggravating things about the month of Adar. There's two of them. So this is the page we get to every time I do this class, and it says, why does my horoscope say I'm a Pisces when I was born during Chodesh Shvat? Or maybe I was born during Chodesh Nisan even, because this is the stretchiest time of year. It's a crazy ass time of year with Adar, because Adar, sometimes you get two of them so you know that the Jewish calendar runs in accordance with the 19-year Metonic cycle. It has 7 leap years. So years 3, 6, 8, 11, 14, 17, and 19 are called leap years, where you get another Adar inserted into the calendar. So it's the leap month. And so during these leap years, the Adar season can swing all the way from solar Aquarius through solar Aries. That's like 2 signs. So it can get very confusing, and it is the swingiest and most fluid and confusing time of year. I'll give you a good example from my own family. My oldest son, Jesse, was born during he was born the 26th of March, which is solar Aries. So he was born already when the sun was in Aries, but his Hebrew birthday is in Chodesh Adar 2, which is very confusing for him, and not to mention the rest of our family. So there's no good rule like we have in our other examples of the other 11 months that we've put together, where if you're born before or after this, you're this or that, because there's so many different possibilities here. You have to literally look at the year to figure out what's going on. So this is also, in terms of the calendar, some of the things you have to know about Adar, like what if somebody was born or has a yard site? So these are the rules of the calendar. So if someone was born or somebody died during Adar of a common year, meaning it's a regular year, not a leap year. In a common year, you celebrate or commemorate that day on the same date in Adar. In a leap year, for birthdays on the same day in Adar 2, the second Adar. For yard sites on the same day in the first Adar. Some recite Chodesh also on the same day in the second month of Adar. Some people do. And I don't understand this. What is this? What's Nahala only in Adar 2? Does anybody know what that is in terms of a recitation or prayer? Jonathan, do you have any idea what that is? I got this from the whole calendar calculation thing. So I think it's a prayer that the Sephardim say, and they only say it during the second of Adar. So if somebody was born in Adar 1 of a leap year, in a common year, they just celebrate their birthday on the same date in Adar, because there's only one Adar. And when it's a leap year, on the same day in Adar 1. But if they were born on the 30th day of the first month of Adar, that comes out in a common year to the 30th day of Chodesh Shvat for the yard site. Some also, just to play it safe, recite Kaddish on the 1st of Nisan, Rosh Chodesh Nisan as well. And for birthdays, it's always on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the 1st of Nisan. In a leap year, it's on the 30th day of Adar 1, because there's no 30th day of Adar during common years. And then if somebody was born and died in Adar the 2nd, on the same day in regular Adar in a common year, and then on the same day in Adar 2. Confusing? Yes. Why? Because it's Pisces. Pisces is a confusing sign. Confusing because of the fish that go underneath the surface of the ocean, and you don't see what they're doing. You have to guess a lot. So in terms of the natal chart of the United States, which is what we've been looking at for examples, Pisces is the ruler of the fourth house, home and family. The fourth house is about home and family and the family of origin. Pisces on the fourth house cusp is extraordinary depth of feeling, strong inner emotional senses, a search for the spiritual or mystical feelings of security, and a spiritual connected to one's ancestors and family of origin. and a feeling of mystical connectedness to family roots. And I think that really shows when you think about the nearly religious regard given to America's founding fathers. That's a perfect example of the fourth house Pisces in a nutshell. We practically venerate them as saints, as if they were our spiritual ancestors and not just a bunch of former colonialists who decided to start their own country because they didn't like paying taxes to the crown. So we really ideate them in a spiritual way to these people who came to the continent. They fought for freedom, independence, and the myth that America is a Christian nation comes from this fourth house in Pisces, when in actual fact, most of the founding fathers were not Christians. They were products of the Enlightenment, and if anything, they were deists rather than what passes for Christian today. So that's how also very Pisces, the idea of illusion. So I'm going to talk finally about the mystery of extra Adar, the second Adar, the addition of the month of Adar has to do with Yosef. I like to say that Yosef is everyone and he is no one at the same time, because there's two ways, well, there's more than two ways, but two main ways that we configure the months and the tribes, either according to the birth order or according to the encampment order. So these are two different functionalities of the 12 tribes. The birth order is the 12 tribes arranged chronologically on the breastplate, the Chosh and Mishpat of the Kohen Gadol. This is for holiness. This is for Kedusha. This is for the 12 tribes in their not embodied state, in their spiritual or eternal state. The encampment order is the order of that the Israelites camped in, moved in, lived in, functioned with, and used to become the territories in Eretz Yisrael. In other words, the embodiment order, and the 12 tribes around the Mishkan is the picture symbol of this. And that's why the Kabbalists use the encampment order according to the RE for the associations of the 12 tribes. Why does Levi never get a month under the encampment system? Because he can't be embodied. He receives no land. Priests live off of the tithes of the Israelites. In the psychological model, Levi is our inner psychological structure, the inner Levi'im. He's us in relation to the 12 tribes around us, and the functionality of Levi in that way has to do with his positions in relation to the 12 tribes. So it's interesting. So I said there's two ways. Well, there's more than two ways, because the Kedushas Levi has a whole other system, which is not chronological or according to the Kabbalistic system. He includes the tribe of Levi, and he associates Adar with Joseph, and the first and second Adar to Ephraim and Manasseh. But it can't be a chronological order, because a strict chronological order would place Benjamin with Pisces, because he was the last born. So I can't figure out how the Kedushas Levi figures out what he's talking about. But anyway, he also associates Adar, or the idea of that there's 2 months of Adar, with Joseph. And of course, the most famous thing we know about Ephraim and Manasseh that we say every Friday night, if we're blessing our children, the sons of Joseph, Ephraim and Manasseh, they were blessed by Yaakov with the symbol of the fish. Let them grow into the multitude in the midst of the land. We know that the Talmud tells us that just as the evil eye has no power over fish, who being covered by water are hidden from sight, so too it has no power over the progeny of Yosef. Okay? And in Above the Stars, the book by Mattisyahu Glazerson that I used for a lot of the references in these presentations, he says that the second Adar has no sign associated with it, and therefore witchcraft has no power over one born during this month, meaning the second Adar. According to the Bnei Issachar, who quotes an ancient oral tradition, Haman's decree for the destruction of the Jews was set for the second Adar. Haman, who according to the Ari was the incarnation of the primordial serpent, the Nachash, and he was a magician. Nachash is related to the word for malevolent magician, Menachos, as characteristics of the Amalekite nation in general. God nullified his intention of destruction by causing the lots, her. Remember, don't cast lots or inquire of astrologers. God nullified his intention of destruction by causing the lot to be cast for the second Adar, which has no astrological sign associated with it, and is therefore impervious to the malevolent magical influences. All right. So I would like to say thank you to all of my many sources, which are acknowledged in all of these presentations. That is Yahoo Glazerson, Above the Zodiac, Written in the Stars, Art and Symbolism of the Zodiac by Iris Fishhoff, which was produced by the Israel Museum in Jerusalem, 2001. Fabulous book, which really started me on my journey with art history and the Zodiac. And of course, my favorite resource, the Bezalel Narcus Index of Jewish Art, online for everybody to see. So that is my little rock around the Zodiac here. Any questions?
Shukach. Wonderful.
I see there's a lot of chat that I didn't see. Somebody
chats.
says, so why, oh, Jesse, why do you feel so much like a Pisces when you're in Aries? Do you know when your Hebrew birthday is? Janice Shordyke says Leonard Cohen was also a Virgo with Moon in Pisces. Oh my God, Jonathan, you have an astro twin with Leonard Cohen. Did you know that? Did you know that?
I intuited it. I didn't know it.
Oh my God, Janice, that is
I love Leonard Cohen.
Info I didn't know, and I'm
reading a new book about Leonard Cohen right now, actually. Yeah.
Well, it's an extremely sensitive combination in astrology. Very sensitive.
Very,
also a famous movie star, Sophia Loren.
I love her.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I've never had my chart done as in such depth and sensitivity as Lorelai Kude, so I recommend her. And without her, we couldn't run the online yeshiva. So thank you again 1,000 times.
Oh, my pleasure.
We thank Hashem and the stars for birthing you through your wonderful mom, Aleha Shalom. May she rest in peace. You know that you're here. Booby, mommy, director, we thank you.
I want to thank Lorelai for this amazing 12-month series and this grand finale. And I want to remind everyone to please go to the link that I've posted and that you're also receiving in a response to your registration for this class, and make a donation to support our teacher. And I want to remind everyone that this Thursday night at 7, we'll have the Aquarian Minion virtual Purim celebration. Go to our website, aquarianminion.org, register. And also for children, special for children on Sunday Pacific time at noon, Rabbi Sarah Shenelman will be presenting a special Purim celebration for children.
Amen. Amen. I'm going to turn off the recording here. Hold on.